I'm honored to introduce our next speaker because I think he's one of the people who is excellent at thinking, speaking, and doing in this area. Norman Solomon. Norman is the founder of the Institute for Public Accuracy, a consortium of policy researchers and analysts. He is IPA's executive director. He is the co-founder of the online organization rootsaction.org, which now has nearly 500,000 active members. He's written many, many books, articles, journals, and media. War Made Easy, Target Iraq, Killing Our Own, the Disaster of America's Experience with Atomic Radiation, and much more. He's appeared as a guest on many media outlets, PBS NewsHour with Jim Lehrer, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, C-SPAN, Public Radio's Marketplace, NPR's All Things Considered, Morning Edition, Talk of the Nation. So I'd like to ask us to warmly welcome our own Norman Solomon.
You all have the pleasure of hearing from Norman. I just wanted to tell you I'm writing a book on the last 10 years in Richmond, and I think back at the table you can get an envelope. If you can donate anything at all, it would help me out a lot. And also I'll be speaking next Saturday at Sonoma Community Center at 4 p.m. So thank you.
Thank you, Gail, and Norman Solomon.
Well, first, I want to say that hearing Gail and Margaret is such a jolt of positive energy, and I'd like to ask for a big round of applause for them. What Margaret was talking about in terms of differentiating between conventional electoral campaigns and what we need, I think is absolutely crucial. One way I came to think of it is that the usual candidates, the usual campaigns conceive of and articulate, whether explicitly or not, that social movements are or should be subsets of a candidate's campaign for office. And that's totally backwards. Electoral campaigns should be subsets of social movements. And if we veer off in the wrong track, we're going to go in a very different direction. Of course, there are so many things that need to be done, so many movements that need to be built, so many ways that we need to build coalitions. But unless we can find ways to coalesce that are effective, then we're going to end up in the same sort of cul-de-sac. A Chinese strategist said long ago, when you're in a struggle with an adversary, don't do what you most want to do. Do what your adversary least wants you to do. And so often, because of our acculturation and some, dare I say it, there are some design flaws in human beings, we do what we most want to do, what we've been taught to do, what our role model to do. And that takes us down that path that sees, among other things, social movements and people as accessories to one particular campaign. The most successful social movements melded with and making use of, if you will, electoral campaigns clearly see that win or lose, any particular electoral campaign should leave compost in the garden. And when you leave compost in the garden, you can keep growing and you can keep seeing how this is an entire process. The sort of the training, the role modeling we've got, the stop and start. What's it like to stop and start a train? It's tremendously inefficient, it doesn't work. And yet we constantly, every year, every 2 years, we're encouraged to jump on the train, get it rolling, building it around individuals. And presumably, we really like individuals that we campaign for. But it's not about them. It's really about the ways that we can challenge the entire structure which includes what Dr. King called the madness of militarism. And when I heard from this podium a few minutes ago the very astute observation that there are some forces way beyond our particular localities that limit what we can do, as important as it is, in our local areas. I thought of what King said when he made the comment more than 4 decades ago that the bombs in Vietnam exploded home. And we can say now that the bombs in Afghanistan and Yemen and Syria and Iraq and elsewhere, they continue to explode at home. In terms of the decimated budgets, the upside-down priorities, the shattered bodies and minds and spirits that come back to our cities and our suburban areas and our rural communities. And yet, unless we can build social movements that include a strong, growing electoral arm, we will continue to descend further and further into what Dr. King called the madness of militarism. All of these ways in which we are dealing with the multifaceted corporate power in our midst create daunting challenges, to put it mildly. And let's face it, in Sonoma County, there is a huge power structure. It is about profit, it's about who owns the real estate, it's about who controls the city councils and the boards of supervisors. And not only is it crucial that we get people elected who are part of and responsive to social movements, but on those precious occasions when we've been able to elect people who are truly part of progressive social movements, we also have that responsibility when they come up for re-election to support them. Julie Combs needs our support, and she's going to get it. And as we look at, our successes, unfortunately, compared to the scale of the problems, they're pretty darn small. And the obstacles are such that we may feel powerless, which is exactly what the power structures and people at the top of them want most from us. We're encouraged to feel powerless. We're encouraged to feel it's just too impossible. And in fact, it is possible. As Eduardo Galeano, the late author from Latin America, commented about, he saw graffiti that said, "Let's save pessimism for better times." We can't afford the immobilization that pessimism creates and is fomented. Part of it, I think, is a pessimism that keeps us in a rut, and it's really hard to see the broader context. We're working our part of the garden. We may feel we're working very, very hard. Other people are doing other things in other parts of the garden, and especially because of the mass media and the electro-political culture, we're diced and spliced, and there's a sense of fractionization, and that works totally against one of the most essential ingredients, which is solidarity within communities, between communities, nationwide and truly globally. I was lucky enough a couple of weeks ago to go on a 9-10-day whirlwind tour of 5 different countries with a number of whistleblowers who not only, and I don't really particularly like to say spoke truth to power, they spoke truth about power. And they were intent and are intent on organizing to counter anti-democratic power from the top down. It's become sort of a cliche phrase, speaking truth to power, but at this point I don't quite get that. Power knows what it's doing. Chevron knows what it's doing. They know the truth of their own priorities, and they are in fact planning and manipulating to implement exactly the human toll that's inflicted by their anti-democratic power. So much more important for us to not look up and speak truth to power. Speak to each other about power. No wonder we have a negative view of power, because we've experienced it as so negative, top down. But in fact, it's bottom-up power that's our hope for social justice, for the environment, to prevent climate change from destroying the future on the planet. I've been working a lot in recent years to challenge the unfortunately now bipartisan perpetual war. When have we heard lately somebody saying, I wonder when the war is going to end? Even during the Vietnam War, people would say, when's the war going to end? When was the last time you asked or heard somebody ask that question? We don't ask it anymore because war has become so ongoing and so endless. The military facets of war. And it is a reality at the same time that class war waged from the top down is perpetual. It's 24/7, 365, and with all the bread and circus and the media distractions that come down on us, that doesn't change the fact that it's inexorable, it's going on constantly, and without eternal vigilance and our capacity to organize effectively, we're going to continue to live in a world of oligarchy, monetized racism, destruction of the environment, and all the other ills, including a savage healthcare system that we really, really want to change. When I was meeting with some people in a public event in Germany about 10 days, 2 weeks ago, I was on a panel with a member of the Green Party and member of the Left Party. And later got to speak at length with Martina Renner. And I think Martina Renner, as an elected official, is a kindred spirit with Gail, with Julie, with others who come out of and are part of social movements. She's responsive to her base. She asks them what they think. She thinks of herself not as an elite elected official, but as was said to and about Joe Hill when he was in prison, you're in there for us, we're out here for you. And we're all part of the same. I don't mean to compare being an elected official to being in jail, although sometimes even being a candidate can feel that way. But I went on from there to Reykjavik and met with Birgitta Jonsdottir, who is in the parliament. The day I met with her, there was a rally, but keep in mind, the population of the entire country of Iceland is smaller than the population of Sonoma County. There's about 300,000 people there. Birgitta was re-elected about a year ago as a member of parliament, and when I visited with her, there was a big rally, and I mean it was a big rally by Icelandic standards, about 250 people outside parliament in a city about the size approximately of, say, Santa Rosa. What were they protesting? They were protesting a new law just being presented from the top of the Icelandic government to ban strikes in the public sector. And I asked someone standing next to me, well, what proportion of public employees in Iceland are unionized? And the answer was 100%. You can see why the neoliberal agenda in Iceland is now pushing banning strikes from the public sector. And there were a lot of nurses and others out there raising hell because they're not going to go quietly. And what Birgitta told me is that when they organized effectively, and by the name of the party is the name of the party is the Pirate Party, they did it in a way that said, we're going to speak truths that are off the media map. And of course we'll be marginalized at first. And in fact, there's now only 2 or 3, as I remember, members of the Pirate Party in the Icelandic parliament. Their popularity in the latest, and I think it's a Gallup poll in Iceland, is 31%. They've risen because of the truth that they're speaking and the way in which they're addressing the economic and social environment that is, in many ways, unspoken, unaddressed by all the other parties. I'd like to just close by saying that I think we have a tremendous opportunity in the North Bay to learn from Richmond, to learn from elsewhere in the country, and to recognize at the same time our unique situation. We're somewhat spread out just in the county itself. There are ways in which the propaganda system is even more pernicious in Sonoma County the daily newspaper is in the hands of the corporate forces. It's very difficult to reach most people early on or quickly or in the process in a thorough way that involves dialogue, let alone organizing. So I want to come back to the compost analogy. I'm just constantly, when I get an email from the Coalition for Grassroots Progress, just pleased and I feel gratified that this coalition has grown out of our electoral campaign in 2012 for Congress. And much more important than that, the Coalition for Grassroots Progress is continuing to grow and develop a precinct campaign. And you know that song, Daddy, What's a Train? I fear there's going to be a song, Daddy, What's a Precinct? 30, 40 years ago, there were concepts of precinct captains in a lot of parts of the country, and for better or worse, people were engaged in their particular precinct, and there was a process. More and more, the major political parties have just been engaged in media campaigns, advertisements, and throwing money at elections. The Coalition for Grassroots Progress at grassrootsprogress.org is infrastructure that we can build on. And Anna Givens and Alice Chan and others have just provided such important leadership. So as you head off from our event here today, and as you reflect on it in the days and hopefully decades ahead in some way, I hope that you'll keep in mind that nothing can be accomplished without organizing. It's not about this was a good speaker or this was a good event or this was a good logo or website or anything. If most of the people in this room set their minds to challenging the destructive corporate power structure of Sonoma County, this county could undergo a political sea change. It's really up to us. Thank you.